Bulldogs! My name is Emily Nay, and I'm a junior, and I'm your public relations officer. And here today we have a very special guest, Mayor Jill Boudreau, and she's here to answer a couple questions that we've collected from quite a few people. So our first question is, this was taken from a poll done for Mount Vernon students. What college did you go to?
So I actually went to a junior college first called City College of San Francisco. So that's where I did my AA degree. And then I was a non-traditional student and went back to school when I was an adult for my bachelor's degree. So I did that called the University of Phoenix. And then I just finished my master's program last year through Western Governors University.
Awesome, thank you. Another question we have is, what are your plans to bridge the disconnect between students and local government, specifically during the COVID virus?
Well, first off, I think you're helping me by inviting me to come do an interview, which is great. So I'm happy to make myself available at any time. It's hard because with everyone being on Zoom, and not being able to meet in person, it just makes things more difficult. Even meeting with city council has been hard, because of that reason. So I think what I could do is interviews, make myself available to classes. I recently joined a second grade class and we talked about government there. So I'm available if there's anyone that would like to spend some time. I'm happy to do that. So hopefully that's a way we can bridge this gap for right now.
Speaking about bridging the disconnect, oftentimes young voters, especially seniors, are still in high school and feel ostracized from the rest of the voting population. What do you have planned to make sure those students feel like they can invest within their community and be part of the voting population?
So we've got the opportunity to engage with our young voters this year. This is a year where there's some city council seats that are up for election. There's 4 of them. And so what I thought would be a great idea is somehow have work with the high school to produce a candidate forum just for students to ask questions of those candidates. And so anything that we can do to help organize that, I think this year is a perfect time to be able to do that. There's several seats open, and I believe that the students should be able to have access to, ask questions of the candidates as they get ready to cast their ballots in November.
Now more than ever, across the nation and including in our own Skagit Valley, students are voicing their opinions on local politics and social movements. Oftentimes, students ask these questions and we have amazing discussions with local officials, but what is an example of Mount Vernon's follow-through on student concerns?
So sometimes I can give an example of back in 2016 when we had the presidential election, and there was quite a bit of upheaval at that time. And so there was an instance where there was students that marched and they ended up at City Hall. And so it was one of those times where I felt just as much sort of anxiety about where we were going. And so I went down and we literally stood on the sidewalk and I tried to listen to what the concerns were. And after that, made myself available to just sit down and talk with those students again and kind of talk through how their local government works, how the federal government affects or doesn't really affect local government. And I think that was some good follow through to just help students understand what was going on and process a little bit. And I think the best way we can do in a small city like us is we can have those conversations. We're not too big to do that and act more like a community family. So anytime that we can help do that, it's important. The other follow through that I think we could do is we've got city budgets. And so when there's requests or things that students want to improve, sitting down and talking through the steps to actually make that happen is important. It doesn't happen sort of really quickly sometimes because of budget constraints, but we're happy to walk students through those processes and have them stick with us until we can come to a resolution.
Awesome. And another question that was given on the poll from one of you guys is, what is your favorite animal?
Well, right now, my favorite animal is named Leia. She is a 12-pound little bundle of joy. She's a mix between a Boston Terrier and a French Bulldog. And she's our first dog. My husband and I, our kids are grown and moved out of the house. And so we have Leia. She's my favorite little animal right now.
Awesome. I guess another question we have for you is, what is the city doing to bridge the gap between those farthest from educational justice, as oftentimes a lot of the impacts are outside of the school or educational system?
So that is a great question. I'm so glad you asked. We right now are working on a project. We call it the Mount Vernon Library Commons. And I believe that education in all forms is the way to lift our community up from poverty or any other issues that kind of cause conflict. And the library, believe it or not, is the way, in my mind, to do that. Services in public libraries are free, so they are accessible to everyone. Our library in Mount Vernon has not been upgraded or expanded since the 80s. That's a long time ago. And so our project right now is to expand our library to double the size, to build a new building, and we're hoping to do that in downtown Mount Vernon. And I really hope that when people come into the city, it's right at the gateway to the city on Kincaid, that they're going to see this beautiful library, which is the source of knowledge and inclusion and community events. That's all free and accessible. And so that's a big project we're trying to do and hope that I can accomplish before I'm done with my term.
Awesome. That leads right into our next question we have about students. A ton of our student population from the middle school to the high school level may not have access to a home or a permanent address. And a lot of times those are what's needed to access these city libraries and city help. So how would you plan to include those individuals who are possibly facing homelessness within that?
So we have reached out to the school district, and we're in the middle of signing an agreement that would make sure that any student that's enrolled in the school district, so it doesn't have to be in the city limits, so any student enrolled in the school district would have access to our library. And it's something that we haven't had before because generally libraries are funded by the taxpayers that live in the city. So this is a really great thing that we can expand services no matter where those students live. If they're in the school district, they're going to have access.
Awesome. And this is another question coming out of the Instagram poll we did. So right now with COVID-19, foot traffic has drastically decreased in certain areas, especially downtown. Specifically, what is the city doing to make sure our local businesses stay afloat when in these high traffic areas?
So a couple things that we've done, including funding. And so the city received some federal funds that we were able to put forward in grants to our local businesses. So the city council allocated, I believe it was over $200,000 from a couple different sources that were given out to our businesses here in the city. So that was a big deal. Checks, I think, ran anywhere from maybe $1,000 up to $10,000 for these businesses. So we were really excited that we had the opportunity to share funds that came from the federal government. So that was a big deal. Another thing we did, it might sound simple, is we allocated some parking spots for people to drive in and businesses could come out and deliver to those folks. And then anything that we can do to partner as far as helping to expand outdoor dining. So say District Brewing on the Plaza was able to expand. We tried to help. So we listened to what the businesses were asking and telling us what they needed and then reacted to that.
Awesome. So another question that many students face every day is they're often dealing with multiple mental health issues, and we find that that is such a big part within the community that not only our education system needs to face, but our government as well. How do you plan to, one, decrease stigmatization of getting those mental health services, and two, what services would you like to provide?
So this is a great question, and what I can say is the more that adults and kids can talk about the challenges that they're facing and be really honest is important. And, straight from me, I've dealt with a lot of anxiety especially over the last year with COVID, but going through things like an election and kind of being bullied online and having all these terrible things that are said about you as an elected official, it's really, really hard. And so I personally have struggled with that in my life. And so I don't want anyone to feel that it's something that they should be embarrassed about. It's hard sometimes. And so hopefully hearing from folks like myself who can just say that is important. Also, our son-in-law, he's in his late 20s, but he went through a hospitalization for mental health. He suffered from some really acute depression. And so we wanted to support him. And so, it touches lives, and there's nothing to be worried about in sharing that. But we also want to figure out how to help people. And so from the city government, we do not have those types of services in our government structure. It comes from Skagit County, which comes from their public health department. But what the city can do is really help engage in roundtables of how do we fund services. One thing that I would love to see is an urgent care facility, like you have an urgent care clinic. So if you fall down and break your arm, you go to urgent care. I would love to have an urgent care facility for behavioral health. And there's different models around different states, but it is a huge issue that we have to have our state help with and our federal government and the county together. But I know there's solutions that will offer practical help to people. But one thing is being able to talk through it. So a student government being able to talk through that subject is important too.
Awesome, thank you. And much like this poll was done on Instagram, we often find that social media is an ever-growing part of our everyday lives. So how does Mount Vernon plan to use social media to interact with its local constituents?
So I know I'm not going to be very popular with my answer here because I don't have social media. And I think it's a tool that we need to use because that's how a lot of folks communicate, but it's not the only way. And so we have to be really cautious around how we consume social media, in my opinion. There can be a lot of barriers to people being honest on social media. And I think the more we engage as human beings face to face is really the number one way we should be communicating. Now, that being said, we do have some Facebook pages with our police department and our parks and our library. And so we like to push information out there. But we also monitor comments and things like that. I think our government is way too important to try and engage over comments on Facebook. It's hard to have those questions answered, to have conflict, resolved through that. So I think we have to be really cautious around social media and do it in limited ways and offer the chance to talk face to face a lot more.
Awesome. Another question we have is most of our upperclassmen and quite a few of our underclassmen hold jobs throughout the community. And an important aspect to that is how does the city plan on moving forward with our job market and our local businesses after the COVID-19 pandemic?
So one thing that we'd like students to know is the city participated in a mentorship program with the school district before COVID, and we would love to see that happen again. We met some amazing students that helped in our offices, and it was a great way to see about jobs in local government. I think people don't really think of that, but we really need you all to think about working in your city, working for your county, working for your state. We need occupations from office staff to engineers to police officers and firefighters and park staff. So there's job creation that's right here where you can contribute to your city. A big part of city planning is making sure that we have commercially zoned areas where businesses can locate so that they can have jobs. And so part of what the city does is make sure that we have as many codes in place as possible to preserve where businesses can locate, but also try and make it as easy as possible for businesses to locate and keep taxes low so that they can grow here in the city, but also in the greater Skagit County. So we're interested in jobs and we are interested in having students work for a government.
Awesome. Okay, we just have a couple more questions, I believe. So, much like many students in our school district, I have no clue what I want to do after I graduate. So, the question is, what did you want to do right out of high school?
So I never, first of all, I never planned to be mayor and I never even thought of it. So any of you could be elected official. So don't forget that too. Right out of high school, I thought I was going to be an architect. And then I wanted to be a small business owner and own my own flower shop. And so I've changed jobs a lot. I was a military wife. My husband was in the Marine Corps, so we moved all the time. And so I did jobs, everything from installing alarm systems to importing food to a small business when we lived in Malaysia. And then I also volunteered as a budget counselor. So I've done a lot of different things. It's so hard to know what you want to do, but just keep exploring avenues and exploring jobs that you didn't think you'd think about too.
Awesome. Okay, so I guess we're on to almost our final question. We have two left. Our question is that many students ask is they often feel like they can't contribute to their community due to various restraints, especially right now during the coronavirus pandemic. And even before and after, we often find that we have these conversations, we ask these questions, and that's where it ends. We get a city official to come into our classroom once or twice, and then it's all fun, and then we don't see any impact or follow through with that. How does the city of Mount Vernon, and what are its steps to creating real change that students can see with their own eyes?
So I think maintaining that communication and follow-up is important, and ways that we try and inform our community of things that we're doing are things like e-newsletters. So the students can sign up for a newsletter that comes once a month, and we try and include pertinent things that are going on with the city. So that's an easy way to just make one click and read about new fire station construction, or what the library is doing, or what road is being paved. So there's ways that students can do that. Students can also look at the agendas for city council every week. And when you look at the agenda, it's published before the meeting, so you can see what we're talking about. And that's a good way to keep informed. We also have a city YouTube channel and videos that are on our website. So all the time we try and put out updates. But what's a challenge recently is that there's so many ways people get information. So it's not just reading the paper anymore, the newspaper, like when I was a student. It's where do you see it on social media? Is there something on YouTube? Can you go to a meeting? Do you see about it in school? So there's lots of ways. So whatever students like to get information from, check out to see if you can sign up to kind of get that information proactively to you. That might be one of the best ways to be able to follow up. And then don't hesitate to reach out and ask for follow up. So sometimes we're super busy, and things just kind of pile up. And so don't forget to reach out and ask for follow-up as well.
Awesome. And as we're closing this interview, our last and final question is, thankfully 2020 is over, but what is your biggest goal that impacts students for 2021?
So I think we go back to that. What does the city do, and what are our basic services that we're responsible for? So sometimes people ask me as a mayor, it's like, well, what are your goals? What big project do you want to accomplish? And that's all fun and that's great. So things like our library project. But my basic responsibility is to make sure that our services continue, so that our fire is able to respond to a fire, that our library can put out information, that our street department is able to clear snow when we have a snow event. And so my number one goal is to make sure that our services are the best that they can be, that they're operating well, that we don't run into any problems, that we can take care of what we do every day for our community. So that's probably the biggest thing that we're focused on right now, is doing that with a pandemic and as we come out of a pandemic.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you in this gym and in this school, and hopefully we can get a lot more of you in this gym soon.